Yeah. That was nice.
Heavy Live with Scoop B. I am Brandon Scoop B. Robinson, senior writer at Heavy.com, and the host of Heavy Live with Scoop B. And welcome to another edition of the show for all those who are paying attention on Heavy on Lakers and Heavy on Celtics Facebook pages, as well as Periscope on Twitter, via my Twitter account at Scoop B, as well as Heavy's YouTube channel. Welcome, everybody. We got a special guest. I've known you since I was about yay high, and good to have you in right now, the one and only Chris Broussard of FS1. What's going on, Chief?
I'm great, man. How are you?
Happy.
Yeah, you were about 12 years old?
I was.
14, 12 or 14? 12.
I was 12.
And I met you in the New Jersey Nets locker room.
Yes. I got you confused with Aaron Williams. You know, it's a lot of light-skinned brothers in the locker room.
I can see that. Other than that, he's about a foot taller. I can see the resemblance.
Yeah, that was a crazy time when I sit back and I think about it, because I feel like there was a lot of talent in that Meadowlands back then. You had Stephen A. Smith when the Sixers would come to town at the Fire. You had Woj, who was at the Bergen Record at the time. It had you there. It had Fred Kerber. I think
Frank Isola was on the Knicks beat.
What was
the Knicks with him?
What was that time like in the 90s between New York and New Jersey, just being a writer on the you were there, you were at the Times at the time. What was that time like?
I mean, man, it was so much different than today. It was like a different world, to be honest, covering pro sports back then, because you didn't have social media. You didn't have, obviously, Twitter and Instagram. So stories broke once a day. I mean, not that the story broke every day, but in the morning was the only time a story really broke. I mean, unless the radio got something, which was rare, but generally, so if you got a scoop at 5 p.m., one night, 5 p.m. you could write it, but if you got a scoop, because you're writing your deadlines that night.
Right.
If you got a scoop at, say, 1 a.m., you would have to sit on it. Or if you got a scoop all in the morning, you'd have to wait till the next day's paper came out, and you just hope that no one else would get the scoop. So, like, if you got a scoop at, say, 12 noon, the soonest you're going to be able to get it out would be the next morning. So you would hope that you were the only one that got the scoop and kept it that way. So it wasn't, it was, you worked hard.
Right.
We went to shoot-arounds every morning before games every night, traveled with the teams, of course, like they still do.
Right.
But it wasn't 24/7, like stuff constantly breaking, constantly looking at what's a national reporter write, or any of your local beat writers. And so that was different. And then you didn't, there were some national writers like Peter Vesey for the New York Post broke a lot of news. But for the most part, you competed. When I was at the New York Times, I competed with the local papers for the most part.
Yeah.
Now, of course, if you write for the Times, the Post, whoever, you're competing not just with your local writers, but you're competing with Woj and Shams and Chris Haynes from Yahoo, and you're really competing with national guys to break stories. So I think as all consuming as it was back then, I think it's got to be much more taxing today, because it just never ends. It literally never stops.
It's like Lamb Chop, the song.
I'm glad I don't deal with that anymore.
Yeah, you kind of made that transition to like opinionist or just personality. Do you miss any of that new stuff at all?
I don't miss the chasing the news, because I obviously broke my share of news back in the day, but that was never really my passion. I loved covering sports and writing, stories on the players, feature stories. Like when I wrote for ESPN the magazine, that was great. Getting to spend a week straight with a player, or 3-4 days with a player. You're at his home, you're out to eat with him, you're meeting his family, and writing stories like that. That was really, I was more into that. Obviously, as a beat writer, you broke stories, but also just being at the games and covering the games. And I used to really like writing game stories. I mean, game stories aren't that big of a deal now, but I used to enjoy writing game stories for the newspaper. And then, covering the team at practice every day and again, getting scoops and things like that. I mean, you're always looking to break stories in terms of getting information that nobody else has. But now there's really such a focus on transactional breaking news. But I like sideline reporting. I miss that. I'm not in the arena nearly as much, because I do my radio show, The Odd Couple, on Fox Sports Radio, 7 to 10 every night, or if I'm in LA, 4 to 7 Pacific. So there's really not enough time during the week to get out to games. Mm-hmm. So I'll go on weekends. But when you're in the arena, you're there and you're seeing everybody and you're talking to executives and players, and that's always fun. And so you miss some of that. And there's times, I mean, like I said, I really liked writing game stories. I enjoyed trying to write a compelling, captivating story that would draw the reader in. And so on Deadline, covering the NBA Finals and big-time playoff games, when you're writing on Deadline, sometimes you're writing 2 stories at once because the deadline's that quick. You got one lead for one team winning and one lead for another team winning if it's close. And so stuff like that, just the adrenaline rush you get from that was always cool, man. But overall, I'm definitely happy to have made the transition. What it is really is just the equivalent, since we're talking about newspapers, it's the equivalent of going from a beat writer at a newspaper to a columnist at a newspaper. Where now as a columnist, you just write your opinion and, you don't have to break the news and things like that. So I'm just doing that on television and radio now.
And I think you brought up such a valid point. I remember when I was in undergrad and I took that trip with you to ESPN years ago. And I remember when I wrote that feature story on you, one of the things that stood out to me was when you were in college. If I'm not mistaken, you played college basketball at Oberlin College, but then you would write game recaps for the school newspaper after.
Yeah, that was yes, I did. At first I wrote, I was on the basketball team. I think it was a weekly newspaper. And I wrote a few articles on the team under my name, byline Chris Broussard, and I'd be in the story. I always had a good game when I wrote the story, Whether I actually do it or not. But then eventually I started using a pen name. I think I may have written, I don't know. It was only maybe about 6, no more than 5 or 6 articles. I don't think I did like that.
Right.
But I eventually started using a pen name. And then I did my senior year, I wrote a big column under my own name about playing that season. And we had a tough season my senior year. So I wrote about the struggles that we had and how tough it was. But it was, so it was not exactly hardcore journalism when you're on the team. Although it did lend itself to breaking a lot of stories.
Yeah, I would imagine that was
broken all types of stuff had I wanted to do it with my boys and my teammates, but I didn't.
You didn't want to pull a D'Angelo Russell.
And I very well could have, believe me. I mean, I'm sure every college team could do that. Got stuff like that going on.
For sure. Tell me something. You're at FS1, you were at ESPN, you've been all over the place. The Cleveland Plain Dealer, I think you were at before you were at the That was
my first newspaper. Cleveland Plain Dealer was my first job out of college. The Akron Beacon Journal was my second job. That was 4 years later, and that's where I really got my big break. Started covering professional sports on a regular basis. And then I went from there 4 years later to the New York Times. And then the New York Times is where I started doing television. Even as I was writing for the Times, I would do some ESPN and some local television. And then in 2004, so 6 years after, I was at the Times for 6 years.
Right.
We went to ESPN, the magazine, in 2004, really as a magazine writer.
Right.
And they liked me on television, so they used me on TV as well. And then eventually it just morphed into more and more and more television until I really wasn't writing very much at all when I left. And now at Fox, where I've been since 2016, I haven't written a word since I've been at Fox.
No, that's real. I'm curious to know the early days. You are a Cleveland, Indianapolis hybrid because of your dad's job. You moved around Syracuse as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I had I moved around a lot. I lived in 5: Baton Rouge, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Syracuse, Des Moines, Iowa, Cleveland, 6 places before I finished high school.
What did your dad do for a living that you had to move around so much?
He was a personnel manager for Travelers Insurance Company. So
nice.
we would get transferred every few years. I mean, I lived in Indianapolis for 4.5 years, Syracuse for 1.5 years, Des Moines, Iowa for 2.5 years, and Cleveland for about 1.5 years before I went to college.
When you watch Cleveland win their championship in 2016, you identify with Cleveland as a Clevelander. How did you feel?
Like I said, I moved to Cleveland when I was 16. So I wasn't really, and obviously the Cavs weren't anything special. They were starting to get pretty good. They had Mark Price and Brad Daugherty, but I was never really a Cavs fan.
Okay.
What I was happy about, I like LeBron. I like him because he's from the area, Akron, obviously. And I got to know him. I must have done maybe 5 or 6 cover stories on LeBron for ESPN, the magazine. So you get to know him a bit doing that. And then what really made me a big LeBron and Cavs fan during that era, was when the Cavaliers won the draft lottery in 2003 to draft LeBron. My parents went out the next day. They still live in Cleveland. And my parents went out the next day and got season tickets.
Wow.
And they were season ticket holders throughout his first tenure, 7 years in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And that gave them really, they've been married. It'll be 55 years in October. So obviously they had a good marriage. But that going to Cavs games, it just really gave them something to do together. And it just enhanced their marriage. And they were really into it. And so being that my mother really loved LeBron. She's met him, got a picture with him. My daughters have met him. And so I was happy for LeBron. I was happy for the city of Cleveland, obviously, having never, not won a championship in 52 years. And I covered the Indians when they went for the Akron Beacon Journal. I was the backup beat writer when they went to the World Series in '95 and had a chance to win it against Atlanta, but lost. So I had been close to them winning that elusive championship. But yeah, so like I said, it was just great to cover that finals, to be there for those games. It was a great experience. And I remember on the court after as they're celebrating, winning the championship and everybody's going crazy, Rich Paul, LeBron's agent, is in my ear. He the greatest ever now. He the GOAT. Jordan couldn't have done that. He's trying to put it in my ear so I go on TV and say something like that. But yeah, man, it was just good to experience that.
When was the first time you had heard of LeBron, you watched LeBron, and you knew that because he was in that Slam magazine high school phenom era of where everybody there was Amari, there was Carmelo, there was Lenny Cook. When did you first lay eyes on him and know that? When did you meet him?
I first heard about him because I may have encountered LeBron when he was a little boy. Because I used to, like I said, I worked in Akron, Ohio, Akron Beacon Journal, and I would be in the summers. I would be at some of the summer tournaments, just with kids and adults playing ball, dunk contests, all that. And the guy that ran a lot of the ones I went to was in LeBron's inner circle early in his career. He's not anymore. Okay. And so it's a very good chance I saw LeBron as a 9-year-old, I don't know, playing ball or something like that. But I first heard of him from this guy who was in his inner circle. But it was when LeBron was in 7th or 8th grade. I had just gone to the New York Times. So it would have been around 1998,
97, 98.
99.
Yeah,
98 or 99. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to this brother on the phone from Akron. And he said, yo, man, we got the next one. We got the next Michael Jordan. And I'm like, I didn't say this because I'm just like, oh, really? Okay. But in my mind, I'm like, yeah, right. Akron, Ohio, gonna have the next Michael Jordan, because Ohio is a football state.
It is.
I mean, it's got some good basketball players, but it's not a national hotbed for basketball. It's probably more so now than it maybe ever has been. But, you'd have a few in Northeast Ohio. You might have a few guys go D1 every year, but it wasn't, I was like, oh, yeah, right. Okay. But he's like, yo, his name's LeBron James. And I was familiar, as unique as the name LeBron is, there was a kid in Lorraine. You're not from Ohio, so you wouldn't know. But there's a kid, a really good high school player who played in college somewhere, I can't, but his name was LeBron Gladden up near where I played in Oberlin, up in Northeast Ohio. So I'm familiar with the name LeBron. His brother, Jamie Gladden, you might remember, played at Xavier, I believe, in Ohio and had some notoriety. But so he telling me about LeBron and he's going to be the next one. He's out. I'm like, so I'm grilling him like, okay, so he killing cats on the national level? That, yeah, man. He like, yo. He like, when we go in the AAU tournaments, they might not win the game or the tournament every time, but LeBron is killing everybody. He the best dude in the country. So I'm like, okay, so, not the best. He was in 8th grade, best 8th grader, best 7th grader, whatever he was. And that was really when he was first put on my radar. And then, of course, you see him on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and as you mentioned, Slam. And the first time I saw him, though, was when he played on national television at St. V. I think they played Oak Hill.
They did against Melo.
Melo, though. He was a senior.
Oh, so it was the year before that?
Well, no, LeBron was a senior.
Okay, got you. Okay.
And Bill Walton called the game, and it was on ESPN. I don't know if Dick Vitale was there, but that was the first time I saw him, and obviously he looked great. And it was funny because man. It's hilarious because I remember guys that I knew, like sons of my, some of my friends in Cleveland, who were in high school, and they like, man, he ain't all that. Like he wasn't all, like looking at that game, he wasn't all that. His no looks wasn't really no looks, and stuff like that. And then I remember being in Cleveland and listening to the radio, sports talk radio, when LeBron was either a junior or a senior, and they were playing a national schedule. This shows you how some people just don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. But I was listening to the radio, and some guys were calling in, some brothers, black brothers, in Cleveland, and they talking about, man, I don't know if he all that or not. They don't really play the big schools around here. Like let him be in the Lake Erie conference and see what he do. The Lake Erie League, like play, the inner city Shaw and schools like that in Cleveland. And I'm thinking, this dude is killing Oak Hill Academy. He killing the best teams in the country. And you don't think he could do damage in the inner city Cleveland League? Like, please. So it was funny, man. because I guess when you're just local and you stay there, your perspective is different. Because I had been all over and I had seen, the best players in the country, and I knew that LeBron was far better than anybody in Cleveland, and but it's just interesting to look back and look. The great thing, man, is he has, I mean, as great as he was, the chances of him living up to what he was touted as, which I would say he's actually surpassed it, is very slim. We see a lot of guys who are touted, as great players, whether it's 8th grade, 10th grade, 12th grade. We just had Shea Cotton from Los Angeles on our radio show a couple months ago. Everybody thought he was going to be the next. OJ Mayo, the next. Even if some guys don't even make it to the NBA.
They burn out.
Even if they make it, their character, I remember, was I could go on and on and on. And then you look at a Michael Jordan who wasn't, viewed as the best player in the country coming out, Dwayne Wade. Kobe obviously was hyped, but not like a LeBron. So a lot of the guys that become the best are, blossom a little later, maybe in college or late in high school or even in the pros. And LeBron, for him to be the best in his group, his class, from maybe 8th grade all the way up to now, still the best player in the world, it's pretty incredible, man. And then all he's done off the court, it's just a great story.
I mean, it's a testament to having a good circle around you. You mentioned Rich. You look at Maverick Carter. You look at some of the other guys that are in his circle. It's been pretty consistent. No controversy. No struggle. He married his high school sweetheart. He did what he had to do. And so I think you bring up a valid point, which transitions into my question about the NBA Finals. LeBron James played for the Cavs, went to Miami, came back to Cleveland, went to the Lakers. He is a member of the Lakers now, plays against his former team of the Miami Heat, against his former coach, Eric Spoelstra. What do you see in this series? 5 games? Lakers in 5?
Lakers in 5. I thought about going 7.
Okay.
I'll give you some of the reasons. Look, the Heat, obviously they play as hard as anybody. They're tenacious. They're tough. They're well coached. And I thought, you know what? Bam out of Bayou. I'm not going to stop Anthony Davis, but, can guard him about as well as he can be guarded. Jimmy Butler, Jay Crowder, Andre Iguodala. Not going to stop LeBron, but probably guard him as well as he can be guarded. The Heat can shoot it. Eric Spoelstra obviously knows LeBron well. Maybe can come up. Look, against Milwaukee, came up with a defense walling off the paint to stop Giannis or slow him down. Against Boston, he came up with the zone defense that slowed them down. Maybe he could come up with something. But then I said, you know what? No. The Lakers are so far superior talent-wise, experience-wise, and LeBron is on such a mission. I mean, we've all heard the stories of the bubble, and it's been clear that LeBron really wasn't that happy in the bubble. He's there for one reason, to win that championship. And now it's right within his grasp. And if the Miami Heat cannot beat the Lakers in a series. I mean, they can win a game or two. They can't beat the Lakers in a series. The Lakers would have to beat themselves to lose this series. And so I think with all that, and then the personal connection to Miami, the tension there was between LeBron and Pat Riley when he left there, the fact that they say it was Pat Riley, I don't know exactly who it was, but that someone told LeBron when he left he was making the biggest mistake of his career. Like, LeBron, I would be shocked if they lose this series. I mean, floored beyond belief, because I wouldn't be floored if Miami makes it a tough series, even though I'm saying 5. But I would be floored if they won it, because it would be one of the biggest upsets in NBA Finals history.
Riddle me this. Okay, the Lakers are playing the Heat in the finals. If LeBron and the Lakers win, does that debunk the myth that the bubble deserves an asterisk? And if they had played the Celtics in the finals, would that have mattered as far as the asterisk conversation that platoon things at the beginning of the bubble?
There's no asterisks. There's no asterisks. I don't believe in asterisks. Now, what I do believe in is that, say in baseball, they should have vacated the title that the Astros won with the cheating. I do believe, not an asterisk, take the title, strip them of the championship. But outside of that, I don't believe in asterisks, because we could come up with something almost every finals, maybe not everyone, certainly not everyone, but I could name off the top of my head several finals that we could come up with an asterisk if we wanted to. Obviously, you have the 2 lockout years. So that's Duncan's first ring in 99, LeBron's first ring in 11. You got the fact that when last year, Kawhi winning it for Toronto, Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson are hurt. You got Golden State's first title over LeBron. Kyrie and Kevin Love are hurt. Isaiah Thomas's first title. Magic Johnson played 75 minutes in the whole series because he was hurt. Like, you can go there. You can always come up. There's typically maybe every 3 or 4 championships something that is awry. And when I look at this, the reason beyond those reasons, it does, like, an asterisk is when everyone is not playing by the same rules.
Right.
So when you say with baseball, they want to put asterisks by some of the PED records, guys that broke records with performance-enhancing drugs. Well, because they weren't playing by the same rules. Everybody's in the bubble. The Lakers aren't getting any type of advantage or disadvantage that no other team is getting. All the teams are enduring the same exact thing. So it's not normal, but it's abnormal for everybody.
For sure.
So if the Lakers were going through something different and they had an advantage over other teams that were in the bubble, or if the Lakers were in a bubble and no one else was, everybody else was at home and doing normal stuff, then you might have an argument for an asterisk. But everybody's under the same circumstances. No bubble, no asterisks at all. We'll remember 2020, man. That was a pandemic. Everything is going to have an asterisk, a mental asterisk by it for 2020. I'm just politics, everything.
Yeah, we got a big debate coming up on Tuesday with President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. You made mention of just different stages of LeBron. And as I'm talking to you, I'm getting visuals of do you play 2K at all?
No.
Okay.
Never played 2K in my life.
Stop playing. For real?
Never.
Okay.
I've seen it, seen somebody play it, but never. Last video game I really played intensely, at home video game, was in television.
No.
That was in college.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm glad I never got, in college we were into it. We played that a lot, but I'm glad I never got addicted, if you will, to video games. It saved me a ton of money and time.
Well, I use this visual. So when you play 2K, you have the active teams, with the NBA 2K21 is out. So you got the active rosters of, Lakers with AD, LeBron, and you got the Heat with Butler and, Duncan Robinson, what have you. So then in the game, you have like the legendary teams. So you may have the 79 Lakers. You may have the 91 Bulls. And then you also have the 2012, 2013 Miami Heat with LeBron and Wade. And And you may have, the 2003, 2004 Cavs with J.R. Brimmer, LeBron James, the Junis Lagauskas, and what have you, Carlos Boozer. As you're talking about different phases of LeBron, I'm getting those visuals on the game. And I guess my question is to you, which version of LeBron would have to come out in this series against the Heat? Is it Miami Heat LeBron playing on the Lakers? Is it LeBron in his first stint with the Cavs? Is it LeBron's second stint with the Cavs? Because he looks like Miami Heat LeBron in LA, as motivated as he's playing, except he has a sidekick in Anthony Davis.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I certainly don't think it's the first Cavs LeBron, because obviously he just wasn't mentally ready to lead a team to a championship. And I think he was physically ready. I always felt like he kind of sold himself short by going to Miami and playing with the other two stars, Bosh and Wade. Because he had the ability, I think, to lead that group of role players in Cleveland to a championship. But maybe he knew better than me and others, because you saw his first year in Miami, he wasn't ready.
Right.
And so he learned from that and obviously got much stronger. But I think, to be honest, he just needs to play like the Lakers LeBron, which, as you said, at points, he's bringing out that Miami LeBron in bursts. But I like one thing he's doing now, and I think this will help him perhaps win more championships, is that as the point guard, or when Rondo's at point and he's the small forward, he's kind of fitting more into the system than just being the system. And he's not like, and some of that's because he's willingly letting AD, I don't want to say like AD doesn't deserve it or hadn't earned it, but AD is being the leading scorer. So LeBron's playing more of a point guard role, and he's doing a lot of other things. And the system everything doesn't revolve around LeBron like it has throughout his career everywhere else he's been. And I think that's good, because he's obviously still dominant, but it allows an Anthony Davis to be dominant. And it allows a playoff Rondo to have his moments and other guys to shine. And so I think if LeBron plays this way and stays physically, near the top of his game, I think he could win more championships like this, because the natural transition would be AD becomes kind of that number one offensive guy and the best player, and LeBron is the second best guy, but he's still a top 5, top 10 player in the world. And he's running the point, getting everybody involved. So depending on how the Lakers build around him and AD, I think their championship window will not close for another 2 or 3 years.
Is it a lock that AD returns to the Lakers next season?
What was that?
Is it a lock that Anthony Davis returns to the Lakers next season?
Yes. A deadbolt.
If you're the Lakers going into next season, you face a Nuggets team who gets better, but they also lose $44 million in cap space with Mason Plumlee and Millsap leaving. Then you figure out what happens with Jeremy Grant. He commands, I think, if he opts out, 14 to 16 million per. You look at the Clippers, figuring out what they're going to do. You look at the Eastern Conference. You look at the Nets. You look at the Raptors.
Milwaukee will be better. Toronto, yep.
Miami. Where do the Lakers need to improve in the offseason?
Well, obviously they're an older team, so I think they need to get some youth and fresh legs, some shooting. Obviously, what particular individual player that is that's tough to say. Obviously, they'd love to get a Bradley Beal, but that's probably unlikely. But I just think if LeBron doesn't lose too much, and he may not lose anything physically, and AD with the confidence from having won a championship and having done it on the biggest stage is going to get better. and they build, you add some shooting, which that's one of their challenges is shooting, although they've been pretty good in the bubble, then I think they're right there because every team's got some flaws.
Mm-hmm.
Clippers need size. They want a playmaking guard. Milwaukee obviously has their issues. Miami's going to have its issues unless they were to get a Giannis, which they're not. So Toronto's, could they lose Fred VanVleet? But even if they don't, they still have issues. Boston's still figuring it out. Denver, the bigs with the Lakers gave Jokic some problems. I mean, he had his moments and he had his games even, but they made it tough on him. So the Lakers aren't the perfect team next year, but they will be, if LeBron doesn't lose too much physically, they'll be right there and perhaps even the favorite going into next season.
What went wrong with the Celtics?
I think that Miami's tenacity wore them down. I think, and Jimmy Butler said it, Boston's a more talented team, but they're young. Kemba's never been on this stage before. And granted, you could say the same thing about Miami, but, Jason Tatum's still a young guy, as great as he is. And Jaylen Brown. They're a small team, for the most part. And I just think that Miami was tougher, more tenacious, grittier. And Brad Stevens is a good coach. Spo out-coached him in this series.
He did. The Nets, are they a preseason in the Eastern Conference next year?
They're certainly a contender, obviously. I don't know if I would say that they're the favorite because we saw it with the Clippers. Like, you could look at the Nets supporting cast and say, man, those dudes play hard. They're the little engine that could. They're going to fit in perfectly around Durant and Kyrie. You got your two stars. Then you got Joe Harris and Jared Allen, all your role players that just like to do what they do. They're going to be nice. But a team like with the Clippers dropping in the two stars, Kawhi and Paul George, it changed the dynamic. And they no longer were that little engine that could. They no longer were Daniel with the slingshot. Mm-hmm. Now they were, the hunted. And it showed their attitude became that. And they weren't as feisty and tenacious as they were before. Now, I think they can get it back next year, but that just shows you some of the challenges. It's easier to add role players than stars because stars change everything. How is Spencer Dinwiddie and Karis LeVert going to fit around Kyrie and KD? Now, one of them you can have maybe come off the bench and that'll be his unit and he can go for his and maybe average, 15, 18 points. But what if one of them starting, is he going to be, and maybe it depends, like Golden State had a system where Durant, Clay, Steph could all get theirs. Right? Offensively. In Miami, it was mainly LeBron and Wade, and Bosh had to kind of become a glorified role player. Mm-hmm. With LeBron and Kyrie, Love became a glorified role player, just spot up shooters and get some rebounds. And so now, obviously, Durant and Kyrie play different than LeBron. So we'll just have to see how it works out. But, and then Kyrie's got to stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't obviously been able to stay healthy in a while. And I think KD's going to be fine. I think he's going to take off where he left off. But, you just got to wait and see with the Achilles. Does it have any impact? I don't think it will. But that's a question mark. So I'll be interested. What you hope if you're a Nets fan is that Steve Nash can do what Steve Kerr did. And what Steve Kerr did was Mark Jackson deserves a job. Like I think so many jobs he would do a great job at. Like Philadelphia is just one. But it's undeniable as good a job as Mark did in Golden State. Steve Kerr took that offense, not the defense so much, the offense to another level. Mm-hmm. He found the perfect offensive system for that group. And if Steve Nash can do that, find the perfect offensive system, I'm not saying I know exactly what it is, but for KD and Kyrie and the other guys, then you're looking at something special. So, but I certainly at this point, I'm not ready to say that they're the team I'm picking to win the East. But on paper, yeah, there's every reason to pick them to win the East on paper.
Switching to the Manhattan borough, after we were in the Brooklyn borough, you discussed, the Bucks a little earlier. Do you think Chris Paul stays in Oklahoma City, goes to the Knicks, or goes to the Bucks?
Well, I don't think he'll stay in Oklahoma City. Obviously, they moved on from Billy Donovan. He's in Chicago, of course. And I just think, if they can get off, as great as Chris was this year, obviously he was a good soldier, but he wants to play for championships. Mm-hmm. And they know, and he knows they're not a championship team.
Yes.
So it would be wise to get off of him if you can with that contract. Now, to me, and obviously I see and hear the Knicks talk, it makes absolutely no sense for him to go to the Knicks on either side, him or them. But if you're the Knicks, the fans, they're tired. This would just show. Now, look, Leon Rose and Worldwide West and these guys, the fans are willing to give them a shot. They're willing to say, okay, this is a different regime. This is a former agent. This is Worldwide West. Maybe they can make it happen. But if you bring in Chris Paul, you are showing that it's the same old situation. How many legends past their prime have the Knicks brought in? And Chris is still playing well, but come on. Penny Hardaway. Amari was legit when he came and had a good run with the Knicks, but still he was, he wasn't the same because of his knees. Steve Francis, Stephon Marbury, who again had a nice little run for about a year with the Knicks or a season, but you get what I'm saying. Like they constantly are bringing in guys. Jason Kidd, after 5 years too late,
right?
And so that's what this and you're not ready. What's Chris gonna do? Make you mediocre? Make you an 8th seed at best? Probably make you just below an 8th seed, and then you mess up your chances of getting a better pick. No. That would be terrible.
Yeah.
And so I would like to see Chris in Milwaukee. I think that would be a great look. It would be interesting to see how they played, but I think that would be a good move. Chris Paul in Milwaukee, certainly better than the Knicks.
Chris, tell me something. I had it wrong. You had it wrong. A lot of people had it wrong last summer with Kawhi and the Clippers. What did you hear after the fact?
Well, that Kawhi would have gone to the Lakers if they had not been able to pull off the Paul George trade.
Right.
It was like the Clippers thought that Friday, it happened on a Friday night.
Right.
The Clippers thought that evening that he was going to the Lakers. Doc Rivers had told people he's a Laker. They thought it was over. And to their credit and the Kawhi's credit, they were patient enough, really to Kawhi's credit with the patience, because he didn't want to be a third wheel, if that's what he would have been, or, a part of that. But he wanted to be home. And he didn't want to have to, physically be the only guy carrying everything. Mm-hmm. And so he would have gone to the Lakers. And they, again, credit to everybody involved that they pulled off that deal and were able to get him, to the Clippers. But yeah, he would have went to the Lakers.
Yeah.
You know.
You a few more questions. You, to me, have had longevity in your career. You've transitioned from, local sports, doing Cleveland stuff, coming to New York with the Times, the Nets, and then, ESPN and a myriad of other things. But I feel like now that the Nets are having a resurgence with, Kyrie and KD, there's this New Jersey, Brooklyn, are people fans. I feel like, some people say on Twitter there's no such thing as Brooklyn Nets fans, or, people say on Twitter there's no such thing as Clipper fans. What do you remember about the old New Jersey Nets days?
Man, I remember being at games where there were fans obviously in the stands, and they were still pumping crowd noise.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember, man, this is not to throw any shade, because I had fun covering the Nets, and the Nets were a big story. I mean, when I covered the Nets, they had John Calipari was the coach. They had Kerry Kittles. Keith Van Horn was going to be the next great white American star. They had Sam Cassell. Then they traded him for Stephon Marbury. So they were a big story. But the Meadowlands, man, it was one of the worst game experiences in the league. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it was horrible. It wasn't like a dungeon or, it was a terrible experience, but it just wasn't up to par with the other arenas. It just wasn't. I remember at one point they would have a high school bands in the crowd, and they would play, which was nice, but it gave it the feel of like you had almost at a high school game, mm-hmm. Rather than a professional NBA game. And it was just a notch below. And then when they got Jason Kidd, of course, and I was off the beat by then, I was on the Knicks. I remember, of course, the Knicks had Latrell Sprewell, Allen Houston. At that point, I think Glenn Rice, Larry Johnson. Like, the Knicks were supposed to be the best team in the area. Mm-hmm. And they weren't a championship team, but, they were going to go. They had Van Gundy as a coach, Jeff. They were going to get to the second round or, make some noise in the East. And the Nets had come off a bad year with Byron Scott as the coach and Stephon Marbury and all types of issues. And then they traded for Jason Kidd, Marbury for Kidd. And the first preseason game when the Knicks and Nets played each other, it was in Long Island at Nassau Coliseum. And you don't like to put too much into the preseason. But I remember watching that game, and I was like the Nets are running roughshod over the Knicks. Jason Kidd is destroying everybody and throwing alley-oops to Kenyon Martin and Richard Jefferson. It was incredible. And most of the Knicks beat writers were, come on, that Nets. This preseason don't matter. I'm thinking in my mind, oh, the Nets are going to be nice. And, of course, they went to the NBA Finals that year and the next year. But remember, when they went to the NBA Finals, they weren't even selling out playoff game. So that shows you it's unfortunate because I live in Jersey and it'd be great to have a team here, but they needed to go. They needed to go. And you mentioned, we were talking earlier, I was in Queensbridge last weekend. And, of course, a lot of Knicks fans. And I told them, I was like, look, this is your excuse. You can become a Brooklyn fan. You got Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. Who in the world is going to blame you for saying, you know what? I'm rocking with KD and Kyrie right now. It's still my city. It's still New York. You got the perfect excuse because the Knicks are horrible. And they still were like, nah. I might go to a game or two, but nah. So Knicks fans are loyal, but they're long-suffering as well.
Do you see Jason Kidd with a head coaching position come next year?
Not next year necessarily, but I do think he'll get another shot. I think, assuming they win the championship, that's always looks good. You were on the championship staff. We know, I thought he did a really good job with Giannis. People forget Giannis averaged 7 points a game as a rookie. Mm-hmm. And then I think 12 or 14. And he gradually improved, and that was under Jason Kidd. And the team wasn't bad. It got bad by the time they got rid of him. But, he did a good job with Brooklyn, with the Nets. So, yeah, I think he deserves another shot, and I think he'll get it eventually.
Does Sam Cassell in Houston make sense?
I don't know what Sam's philosophy is coaching-wise. And I say that because, one, I think Sam will be a really good head coach because Sam was a leader, man. Sam was a leader. I cover teams where he's on. I love Sam. He's a great guy. He was a leader. All the players loved him. He could instill confidence in guys. I contend, maybe this is putting too much on it, but now obviously Stephon Marbury was a better player than Sam individually. But I contend that had the Nets not traded Cassell for Marbury, and Cassell got hurt early in that season, and the Nets lost like 16, 17 straight games.
And they fired Calipari and Casey. I remember.
Yeah, and that led to Calipari getting fired. But had Cassell stayed healthy, been able and stayed playing with Keith Van Horn, they had Jason Williams, Kendall Gill, I think Keith Van Horn's career may have been different. Wow. Because remember, Van Horn was viewed, he was going to be a star. He averaged 19 and 8 as a rookie, then 26. Yeah. Like he was legit. And Sam believed in Keith. Keith wasn't – some players was like, Keith is a little soft. But he had Jason Williams, who obviously had the tragedy where he shot the man with the jet. But Jason Williams was his bodyguard. Jason loved him. He was tough. He was his protector. He built Keith. He was going to protect Keith. And then Cassell built up Keith. Like, that's my man. I believe that's, so Keith was brimming with confidence. And his guys believed in him. And Marbury came. And I think that Marbury, from afar, this is speculation. Because it wasn't right from the get-go almost with Keith and Steph. But I think that in Minnesota with Kevin Garnett, I think that Stephon may have looked at Van Horn from a distance and said, you know what? He's not Kevin Garnett, but he's a really good all-star type player. Like, he ain't that far behind. I mean, he's good. And I think he got to Brooklyn or New Jersey and saw that Keith wasn't as good as he thought. Whether it was because he thought he was soft or whatever, I think, again, this is my speculation. Mm-hmm. I think he felt, man, this dude ain't all that everybody think he is. Everybody's saying he is. And with Steph, it showed in his body language, in, just, and it became evident he didn't believe in Keith. And I think that sapped some of the energy, the life out of Keith, knowing his point guard, who Keith really wanted to play with. Keith had said before the trade, before he even knew he had a chance to play with Stephon Marbury, that would be the one point guard he would love to play with. And so I think seeing that this guy don't believe in you, he doesn't think I'm as good as, as he is, or, as good as he thought I was or whatever. I think that just took the life out of Keith. Now, you can blame Keith for that because you shouldn't let another player take your life like that. Right. But that's what I think happened. And then, Kid comes in and Keith plays well, but never really became that 20, that star that people thought he might be.
Are there any teams who have coaching vacancies? You look at the Thunder, you look at the Pelicans.
I was having trouble hearing you.
I said, do you look at any of the coaching vacancies? You have the Thunder, you have the Pelicans. Do you look at any of those coaching vacancies and say, Mark Jackson checks any of those boxes?
Mark Jackson checks the boxes. I think he checks the boxes for Philly.
Agreed.
I certainly don't think Mike D'Antoni checks the box for Philly.
Why?
Now, and I'm in the minority, I believe, in that I'm one of the rare guys that thinks D'Antoni's a Hall of Fame coach. I mean, maybe there's more. I'm sure there's more, but I don't know that it's a majority of pundits. I think he clearly is, even though he doesn't have a championship.
Right.
He's been instrumental in the game changing. He's had great success. He's like a modern day Don Nelson.
Great.
And actually has, I think, had more success than Don Nelson. But so I think he's a Hall of Famer, but he's a one-trick pony for the most part. He shifted a little in Houston, but he has his style of play. And if he doesn't have the players to fit that style, he's still going to try to put them into that style. He's not going to adjust to the talent that he has. He's going to make that talent adjust to his style. And he doesn't want a big. He don't want a big man like Joel Embiid. And what's he going to do with a point guard that can't shoot? And so, like Steve Nash, I don't know if people thinking, oh, Ben can be a Steve. Steve Nash was a great shooter. Didn't shoot a ton, but could shoot it 50% and 40 from three. So I just think that would be disastrous. And I think it would kind of lend itself to breaking up Embiid and Simmons. And what I say when I look at those two is bring in a coach that either has a track record or convinces you through his interviews and what he shows you and the strength of his personality that he can maximize Simmons and Embiid together. Mm-hmm. And then if it doesn't happen, he can't. They just can't work it out. They can't excel together. Then after next season, move one of them. But I don't think D'Antoni's that guy, so you're going to probably end up moving one of them prematurely. And so I think that would be horrible. I think New Orleans is good for D'Antoni. Now, obviously, Alvin Gentry's a bit of a disciple, plays similar to D'Antoni, but I think D'Antoni would be good in New Orleans. I think Mark Jackson, as I said, Philly. The Thunder, Mark with a young team, that's what he did in Golden State. He'd be fine there. But I'd love to see him in Philly and D'Antoni or Ty Lue would be good in Philly too, but I actually would prefer Mark personally. But Ty Lue New Orleans might be interested for him too.
Last question. King, it's a movement. It's regional, it's national, it's international. For those who do not know about your King movement, tell us more.
It is King is an acronym that stands for knowledge, inspiration, and nurture through God. And it's a men's movement based on Christian teachings and beliefs and principles that really wants to help men become all that God created them to be. And boys, we do a lot of mentoring and things like that, but help men and boys become the men that God created us to be, the husbands, the fathers, the leaders, the citizens, the role models he created us to be. And we do a lot of community service, and we have chapters throughout the country. Mm-hmm. And we feel that if we can, as men, become what God created us to be, we can have stronger families, children, communities, be a stronger people as African Americans. It's for all people, but it's primarily African American, and have a stronger nation, and you see that the nation is incredibly divided and polarized at this time. And we need to become stronger as a nation. And so we want to do it through Christ.
Enough said. Chris, I want to thank you so much. I talked about that trip we took to ESPN years ago. And one of the things that you shared with me that sticks with me to this day is write how you talk, not how you think people want to hear you.
Right.
I took that and ran with it.
Yep. That's the A. And you've had success with it, man. You're doing a great job. You know, you're a great example for a lot of young people coming out today because, you know, the climate is so different from when I came out of school in 1990, where you would just go to a radio station, a television station, or a newspaper or magazine. And if you didn't get to one of those, you were kind of out of luck. But today, obviously, with social media and all the different outlets, you can start your own thing. And whether it's a blog, a podcast, whatever it may be. And so you're obviously doing a great job of that, man. So you're an example for a lot of people out there. And so I'm proud of you, man. And you know, keep up the great work, man.
I appreciate you. Those are kind words. And I appreciate your predictions on the finals. You say Lakers in 5.
What you got?
I got Lakers in 6.
6 is, you know, and so a lot of times I go 6. 6 is kind of that, and even when I do it, so this is not personal to you. No. I always kind of feel like 6 is that cop-out pick. Yeah. 6 is easy. Like, okay, I don't think they're really good enough to go 7. 7's an investment. 7 saying, okay, it kind of could go either way, you know, because once the 7th game comes, all bets are off. 6 is kind of, yeah, it's the easy. And I feel it the same way when I say 6 too. But yeah. It could be 6. Here's my thing. And kind of, I mean, I guess 5 ain't going to be much of a series for sure. 6-game series tend to be anticlimactic because a lot of times a team might be up 3-1 and you know it's over. And then maybe the team comes back and wins game 5, but you know what I mean? Like, so, but like I said, 5 is pretty anticlimactic for sure. You know, that's true. So, it would be great to see. I would probably rather see 6 because maybe 6 could be 2-2, you know? So that would be more exciting than 5. I'll give you that. So hopefully you're right, or maybe we get a 7. I'd love to see LeBron win it, but like I had this argument. I know we got to go. I had an argument with a colleague, a debate on the air. He was saying the best team always wins a 7-game series. And I said, no, I don't agree. I said, if you want to say the best team always wins when they win in 5 or when they win in 4, when they win in 6, I can buy that. But once you get to a 7th game, anything can happen.
Yeah, but you know what, Chris? You talk. They said the best teams wins in a 7-game series. Are we talking finals or are we talking playoffs?
I'm talking everything.
Because if that's the case,
I think generally the best team wins. But it's not like I'm not trying to say equate it to March Madness. But I'm saying I think the Clippers are better than Denver.
That's what I was getting ready to say.
But they lost. You know, so my point is a 7th game. Once you get to 7. It's like March Madness. Anything can affect that one game. A guy can be off. A guy cannot be feeling good. The pressure, whatever it might be. But when it comes down to one game, a team that's not the best can win that one game.
Yeah. And
that's what a 7th game often is.
Yeah, and I've used this analogy often throughout the playoffs. The Nuggets are that 4th cup of wine. Everybody laughs when I say it, but it's true. It's on you. You're socially gathering. You know,
right.
Having a meal, and you're like, wait, what? Like, wow. When I look at the Clippers and the Nuggets, the Clippers on paper were the better team, but I look at the Nuggets and the Heat in the same vein. They're grinders. Right.
Absolutely.
The Nuggets were younger. The Heat were targeted grinders because you had Jimmy, but Bam Adebayo was a grinder. He kind of was a diamond in the rough. The world is beginning to know who he is. Magic Johnson saying his name on Twitter and he's hype. You look at Duncan Robinson, he can shoot. Tyler Hero, to me, you could appreciate this. Tyler Hero is the second coming of Bob Sora mixed with Klay Thompson.
You know what? That's not bad. I covered Sura when he was in Cleveland.
Yep.
He was a rookie. Sura was, yeah, that's interesting, man. I love Bobby. He was a really good guy. And he got caught up in that he never settled in at point or two.
No.
So they had to play him. He kind of had to back up Terrell Brandon at the point. Then he played some two. So he kind of never really settled into that one thing. But yeah, that's not a bad call. That's actually a pretty good call.
And I think when you look at Miami, they're grinders, but I feel like Miami almost got caught up in how everybody was so shocked that Denver was that good last year, because people are paying attention to the Lakers, the Clippers, the Knicks, the Nets, everything else. I feel like Miami was like this secret that nobody wanted to let out until they kicked the Pacers' butt in the first round.
Well, and look, they were a 5th seed too.
Yep.
So, you can't really blame people. But they, some people saw it. They did show some stuff for sure. Credit to Jimmy Butler, man, and Eric Spoelstra. All those guys.
Yes, sir. Brother, I thank you for your time. And we'll be
enjoyed it, man. This was a lot of fun, brother.
Yes, sir.
We got to break bread soon.
You do. I'm going to call you soon. My man.
All right, brother.
With Scoop B, signing off.